From a private jet that's basically a glorified Uber pool with strangers splitting the bill, to a jet that's registered in a way no flight tracker on Earth can find it. There's literally no limit to how expensive, exclusive, and untraceable private flight can get. The wild part? The most locked down one, Level 7, isn't even about getting somewhere fast anymore, but Level 1 already gets you 90% of the flex for about 1% of the price. Let's dive in. Level 1, the membership seat. Level 1 isn't a jet you own, it's a seat on somebody else's, sold through a membership program that works like a subscription box for rich strangers. You buy hours, not a plane, reportedly around $10,000 to $20,000 an hour depending on the aircraft size, and you fly on whichever jet the program has available that day, sometimes alongside other members you've never met, all splitting a plane none of you actually own. The catch most people don't clock is that peak demand days, holidays, major sporting events, the weeks everyone actually wants to fly, are exactly when availability is tightest and upgrade fees quietly appear. Meaning the membership that promised freedom from commercial scheduling ends up bound by a scheduling problem of its own, just with a much nicer name for it. The buyer is a startup founder who just closed a round and wants the photo more than the flight, posting the tarmac shot before the wheels even leave the ground. From here, the plane stops being shared with anyone. Level 2, the fractional share. Level 2 is fractional ownership. You actually own a slice of a specific aircraft, a 16th, an 8th, sometimes a quarter, guaranteeing a set number of flight hours a year on a plane that's still, technically, 75% somebody else's. Here's the number that changes the entire conversation. Industry estimates reportedly put deadhead legs, flights where the jet flies with zero paying passengers just to reposition for the next pickup, at somewhere around a third to nearly half of all charter and fractional flight hours in the air at any given time. A huge share of the private jets you see on a flight tracker right now are burning fuel to go get somebody, not to take anyone anywhere. Fractional owners reportedly also pay a separate hourly occupied rate on top of the upfront purchase of their share, plus annual management fees regardless of usage. A layered cost structure that makes the spreadsheet math considerably less flattering than the sales pitch that produced it. The most expensive part of owning a fraction of a jet isn't the flights you're on, it's the ones you never see, that you're still paying for anyway. Level 3, the private terminal. Picture this. A car pulls directly onto the tarmac, past the terminal entirely, and stops at the base of the stairs. No security line. No boarding pass scan. No shoes coming off. 30 seconds after stepping out of the car, the door closes and the plane is already moving. This is Level 3. Full ownership of an entry-level private jet, reportedly starting somewhere around $5 to $15 million, depending on the model and how many hours are already on the airframe. The plane is entirely yours now. No fractions, no shared calendar, and it flies through a completely different physical infrastructure than the one everybody else uses. Private terminals called FBOs that most passengers have never even heard of, let alone seen from the inside. The tarmac doesn't feel like an airport. It feels like a driveway that happens to have wings parked on it. Because from Level 4 onward, this stops being about the plane entirely. It starts being about who's allowed to know you were ever on it. Level 4, the boardroom flex. This obsession has a starting point. Corporate and private jets barely existed as a category before the early 1960s, when aircraft like the original Learjet reportedly turned business aviation from a rich man's novelty into something resembling an actual industry almost overnight. What changed wasn't the technology, it was the psychology. Once a handful of industrialists had one, not having one started to read, to their competitors, like a signal of exactly how large the company wasn't. Level 4 is that same instinct, generations later, where an aircraft purchase gets discussed in a boardroom less like a travel expense and more like a corporate insignia that happens to be able to take off. The 60s built the category. Every decade since just made the entry price higher and the reason for owning one slightly harder to say out loud. The videos are the introduction. The books go deeper. Level 5. The Alias Manifest. Hollywood solved this exact problem decades before private aviation caught up to it. A celebrity checking into a hotel doesn't check in under their own name. They check in under an alias the staff is briefed on in advance, so the record itself never has to say who was actually there. Level 5 runs private aviation on the identical logic. Flight crews and FBO staff reportedly sign non-disclosure agreements before they're told who's on the manifest, sometimes hours before departure. Meaning the person pouring your coffee at 35,000 feet may have found out you were the passenger about the same time you did. Some operators reportedly maintain what's internally called a sterile cockpit policy for high-profile clients that goes beyond the standard aviation term, extending the silence from the flight deck into the cabin itself, where staff are briefed to acknowledge nothing about the passenger, even to each other, once the doors close. Hollywood figured out that privacy isn't about hiding in a room. It's about making sure the record of the room never says your real name. Private aviation just applied it to the sky. Level 6. The Invisible Trust. At this level, the aircraft itself stops being registered the way you'd assume. Many private jets in the US are reportedly held not by the owner directly, but through an owner trust, often set up in Delaware, a legal structure where the trustee's name appears on public FAA registration records instead of the actual beneficial owners. A tail number search returns a trust company. It does not return a person. The trust structure exists for a genuinely mundane regulatory reason too. Foreign nationals often can't register aircraft directly under US law, so the trust was originally a workaround for legitimate international buyers. It just happens to also, conveniently, double as the single best privacy tool in the entire industry, which is less a loophole than a feature nobody bothered to close. Every part of this level is publicly documented and completely legal. It's also, functionally, the aviation version of an unlisted phone number that costs 8 figures to qualify for. That's the system working exactly as designed. Level 7 is where the system reveals what it was actually designed to do. Level 7. The Erased Trip. This is the level that overturns everything you assumed for the last 6. Once the tail number's hidden, the trust owns the plane instead of a name, and the crew's under NDA before they even see the guest list. The actual product being sold at Level 7 isn't speed anymore. Every private jet already solved speed decades ago. What Level 7 actually sells is the fact that, as far as any public record is concerned, the trip never technically happened. No commercial boarding pass, no public seating manifest, no name in a flight tracker's history log for anyone to screenshot later. A small airport with a private FBO in many jurisdictions doesn't require the same passenger-facing documentation a commercial terminal does, which means a person can leave one country and land in another with dramatically less public trace than taking a domestic economy flight would have left behind. So next time someone tells you the private jet is about the flight, they're missing the entire point. The flight was solved in 1963. What they've actually been buying, level by level, is the ability to make an entire trip disappear the moment the wheels leave the ground. 7 levels, and the actual currency was never fuel or legroom. It was how much of the trip you got to erase afterward. Go beyond the videos. Read my books. If you liked peeling back this one, I've got 6 more levels videos just like it sitting on the channel right now. Go get lost in one.